Good evening. Welcome again to the monastery. I'm just going to answer a few questions that were asked over quite a long period of time, and I didn't get around to it. And I made a few notes here so that I can follow the actual questions that were asked and provide something of an answer. I'm going to, first of all, people asked me about a comment I made some time ago in the Old Testament is about you, that when we read the Hebrew text, one of the reasons we sometimes kind of miss the point or misunderstand it is because Hebrew perspectives and the culture in which the Hebrews lived and the way Hebrews told stories is quite different from anything in our Western culture, including Greek. And part of the problem is when translating into Greek, as the New Testament was translating Christ's Aramaic sayings into Greek. So we're going to look at the Old Testament, though, mostly this evening, and I want to explain a few things. First of all, generally in the ancient Hebrew, the point of a story was in the middle, not at the end. And that often throws people off. And the other thing is that the Hebrew language wasn't about abstractions. It was about concrete actions, very concrete language. And that doesn't help a little sometimes in understanding, because we'll read the English translation and presume that everything is concrete as we understand it in English. However, it isn't concrete that way at all. It's concrete in the sense that it's something readily perceptible to the senses and not something that's abstract by reasoning or rationalism. And I'll give you a couple of examples. For one thing, in the Hebrew, the future is behind you and the past is in front of you, which is exactly the opposite of the way we see it. But it's quite logical if you think about it for a moment, because the reason the past is in front of you is because you can see it. You can see into it, you know it. And the future is behind you because you can't see it. You can't see into it. And so it's just the way the words are. We would go into Hebrew vocabulary, but I think we'll probably keep that at a minimum. But Hebrew is a very conceptual language. It's not a lot of abstractions in it. It's also a heavily metaphoric language, but then almost all ancient languages were. It also has a kind of poetry or a beauty to it that comes from the way things are said, differently than the way we would say them. We might say, for example, "It's a beautiful day." The Hebrews would say the same thing by saying, "The sun gives warmth on my face." And Arabs will say the same thing. It's a Semitic way of saying it. It simply means it's a beautiful day, but it's something now that can be directly, immediately sensed with the normal senses. The sun gives warmth to my face today. And that's the way it's said. So we're talking mostly generally about actions and not descriptions, really. So some of the questions that were asked were, first of all, there are two tenses of verbs in Hebrew. One is the complete and the other is the incomplete, an incomplete action. And so that also creates a problem. The other thing is where words come from. The word for father, for example, av. Of course, we would say Abba from the Greek rendition of it, Abba, Abba, Av. It actually comes from the word for a tent pole, the center pole that gave the strength to upholding the tent, because the father was the strength of the home, the strength of the family. The Av, the A comes from the head of an ox, the letter A, alpha, or aleph, and the ox symbol for strength. And the other one, alpha, vet. Vet is a tent or a house. So the word for father really means the strength of the house. In the same way, or ama, as I would say later, for mother. Is the word for a glue or an adhesive, because she's the glue or the adhesive that holds the family together. The father is the strength of the family, so he's Av. That is alphabet, the ox, and the house, the strength of the house. And so this is something to remember, that the root words in Hebrew are extremely important to understanding what's actually being said. Otherwise, we get a total misconception. For example, I think in Numbers 15:38, where I think that was one with Hebrews were told to put something at the corner of their garment. Now, it's usually translated a fringe, but actually, it isn't a fringe. The tzitzit is a blossom. It comes from the word sit, which is a blossom on a fruit tree. And the reason they were to sew the blossoms, these symbolic blossoms, onto the corners of their robe, was to remind them to bear spiritual fruit, to bear the fruit of the law by obeying the commandments of God, and to bear the fruit of the covenant. So they were understood as symbolic blossoms and stretched across the bottom of the robe. And later, during the Hellenization of Palestine, and the Greeks who had gone abroad and lived in other countries, to try to translate it, it was translated essentially as a fringe, but it actually was a blossom. And the root word is sit, which is a blossom on a fruit-bearing tree. So that's rather important to kind of remember, to bear the fruit of the law and the covenant. The other thing is, in Deuteronomy 31:26, where the ark, now remember, the ark is made of acacia wood, which is rather dark wood. The acacia tree, see, there's a connection, because the acacia tree would have been the bush that burned without burning, through which God spoke to Moses. And another thing about the acacia tree is it had very long thorns on it. So when people would have gathered honey in the wilderness, shepherds with their sheep and all, and they would have the honey for themselves. But to keep it away from the kind of predators who would have gone for it, they would actually have kind of like a nest in an acacia tree where they would put it. And most of the predators who'd go after it wouldn't go through the thorns. Acacia were planted in a hedgerow around an area to protect it from predators, the same way pyracantha, or firethorn, was planted in the Balkans with the long, sharp thorns on it as a hedgerow, very thick, very dense, which you wouldn't penetrate because the thorns would rip you to pieces. And so the honey was kept in the midst of an acacia thorn tree, and to protect it. And so the acacia was then used for shelter and protection. So the ark was made of this dark wood. Then the gold was hammered out in very thin leaf and placed over the acacia wood ark, the box. Really, that's all that an ark means. Aron is just a box. And when it's spread over the dark wood like that and spread thin, it's transparent. Now, a shiny metal that's lighter placed over a dark background creates a mirror, so that there was always a reflection back from it. When the high priest was in the Holy of Holies, the reflection would come back to him. Now it's interesting that in Deuteronomy 31:20, that's where they placed the Torah beside the ark. And there's something in this. And remember that St. Abba Isaac the Syrian once wrote about the scripture, calling it a mirror. Now, this is something coming from a Semitic background, a Semitic concept. If you put the Torah next to the ark, which had a mirror effect, first of all, the Torah would be reflected in the ark, and anyone looking at the ark and the Torah would also see a reflection of himself back again. So this reflection back into yourself. And this is something that we want to kind of look at a little, because the blossom, the tsiet, which was put on the corners of the garments, which is translated as fringe, was actually supposed to bring something into you, that you were to bear that fruit of the law, the fruit of the covenant yourself. So now we see this mirror image of the ark and of the Torah put next to the ark, so it reflects back into us, or back onto us. Now, the other thing is that if we look at the one of the words for God, which is Allah, in very ancient Hebrew. El meant strong or authority, and it was used as a word to reflect God. But in the same way we use God, it's not a personal name. It's not a noun, like to say, my name is Lazar, or you could say he's a priest. Priest is generic, but Lazar is an actual personal name. El means the strong authority, and it's used, of course, to refer to God. Allah, which was used in a more personal way, really means the one who gives unity, the one who brings unity, the one who unifies or unites. And see, a lot of the times we really misunderstand what's being said, because in Hebrew the root words are so extremely important. There's something else too. In the Torah, the actual meaning of the word is a journey. Remember, the Hebrews were a Bedouin type people. I mean, they lived in tents, kept their sheep, and they moved from place to place. And they would have kind of understood it. So the Torah is a kind of a journey, a way of journeying. And actually, the root word for righteous in Hebrew is one who's following the right path on a journey. And the opposite of that, wickedness, is one who is off the path. Sin would be one who's off the path, not following the right path. But the Torah is the journey. And righteousness is walking on the right path in that journey. And that has to be understood, righteousness. It isn't just about externally correct behavior or something, but it's actually about being on the right path, following the journey that the Torah leads you on. And that's one thing to remember, because the Torah journey is the roadmap for the journey. And the journey is through this life. Now, also, the other thing is that the idea of eternal or eternity, the word that's used for eternal or eternity, the root word in Hebrew, is beyond the horizon, as far as the eye can see, and then beyond that. And so this is a few things to put together for understanding a little better where we're going in our study of the Scripture. The word for grace in Hebrew is actually the same word as for an oasis. The root word is like an oasis in the desert. It's if you put that together and think about it, you can understand why the word for oasis would be used as a gift of God's grace. And so that's these concepts are so important for us in understanding the Hebrew. And we'll go on with the second broadcast, but I think we're almost out of time on this one.